Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining. My name is Kim Kronk, and I am Millcraft's marketing manager. We're excited you're here, and we appreciate your time. If you have just joined, please go ahead and scan the QR code on the screen. That will take you to Pull Everywhere, where you can engage and interact with us during Greg's presentation. You can also use the text or join by web options listed in the bottom left corner of the screen. We appreciate you all being here. We know there's a lot of things that you could be doing right now, and we're just really happy that you chose to spend your time with us today. So today we're honored to introduce Greg Lovensheimer, our president at Millcraft. Greg brings over 30 years of experience in the paper, print, and graphic communications industry, having begun his career at Mead Paper. His extensive background spans the entire spectrum of manufacturing and distribution processes, from starting as an operator to roles such as supervisor, trainer, capital project manager, Lean Six Sigma Green Belt, product manager, director of operations, chief operating officer, and now our esteemed president. In addition to his role at Millcraft, Greg serves as a board member of Two Sides and is the very recent past chairman of the board for the National Paper Trade Association, as he just transferred this role last week. His wealth of knowledge and leadership have been instrumental in shaping our company and our industry. We're excited to share valuable industry news and insights with you today, and we appreciate you taking the time to join us. Thank you all for being here, and please welcome Greg Lovensheimer.
Thanks, Kim. And again, it's not so much about me as much as it is this community of folks that are on the line here. As I look through the roster, as I can see you all. First of all, I appreciate those that have their cameras on. It's helpful because sometimes you feel like you're just talking to a black box. This is helpful to actually see, body language, but just, the community of folks that are on the phone. This is what makes this industry really cool, is the fact that we're able to learn and, bounce things off of each other. And so really that's what the whole Poll Everywhere is really for. We're going to ask you a series of about 4 questions, and it's really trying to draw insights so that as a community, hopefully, we gain more knowledge than just the slides that I've prepared. That part of this is that we all have the opportunity to learn from each other. So I just implore you all to please, simply you can either join by the web, join by a text. The easiest way for me is scan that QR code. It'll take you right there. And like I said, we've got no more than 4 questions, and you'll see how they interact. So let's start off the year, right? So we've turned the page to the brand new year, right? One of the first things I was taken with was, Pantone releases a color of the year. For this year, it's Mocha Mousse, right? And I love the fact that if you've not gone out to the Pantone's website and actually read about it, I thought it was interesting that this is Pantone 17-1230. It's a warming brown hue imbued with richness, right? There's their title, right? It nurtures us with the suggestion of delectable qualities of chocolate and coffee, and answering our innermost desire for comfort. And so as we think about the last several years of chaos, we're all kind of looking for something a little delectable and some comfort along the way. So I thought that was interesting that that's their color of the year. My word for the industry, kind of in a word, is really this idea of transition, right? So if you think about where we were the last time we spoke, we used the word anticipation. And really, I believe just looking at the leading indicators, and talking to several of you that are actually on this call, we're all kind of seeing and sensing that maybe American manufacturing is in a period of transition, and that obviously commercial print and graphics come along for the ride. And you've really got this Trump 2.0, and yes, there are tariffs, and we're trying to understand, is Congress, what kind of role do they play, and with policies and executive orders, and what does all that mean? Right? We're now past destocking for the most part. The data would show it. When we talked last quarter, on this call, you all kind of said that. And really, inflation has slowed to the point where there were, 4 rate cuts. And, obviously, that is meaningful. Every time there's an interest rate cut, whether you realize it or not, there's a lot of capital dollars that come off the sideline and all of a sudden invest in major projects. We'll talk about that. And we'll talk about, does U.S. manufacturing now rebound, as a part of all of this change that's going on? So, one of the things that I like to do is, hold myself accountable. So we put this agenda together. What did we say the last time we were together? What did really come to pass, right? Never want to get too full of yourself. Don't get too high with the high. Don't get too low with the lows. But then talk about, where are we headed in Q1? Looking at it from a macro level, because those are the things that drive, kind of the micro level activities, and then look at printer insights, then look at, the paper market, and then we believe we've got some recipes for success or prescriptions for success, and there's always wild cards in the mix. And that really the reason we're here is about supply chains. We talk all the time internally at Millcraft is our job is to protect and preserve our customer supply chains. And it's by doing things like this where we're trying to hopefully educate not only our clients, but also our suppliers, just to try to get a community, if you will, of supply chain linkages kind of tied together. So obviously you guys are all on top of it, man. I tell you what, I appreciate that. So those of you who haven't already done it, you can actually scan that QR code at the top of the screen. But the first question really to get a sense is, what words would you use to describe the state of the graphic paper industry? And I just love it. Challenging, slow, uncertain, transitioning, lackluster, unpredictable. It's January. I love that comment. Angst, crosshairs, concerning, typical, stellar, steady, roller, riding, expensive, tentative. I mean, those are some really great words. And I think that's, there's a lot of optimism in there. There's also a little bit of speculation in there in terms of, is this, too good to be true, or is it too choppy? Is it, there's enough positives and negatives to go around. And I love the comment. That's why I love the comment of January. I never like to look at January's performance as January as 31 days. I generally like to look at them as kind of combined together with February as it's a 59-day kind of operating window, just because there are so many things that can go on in the first part of January that, really aren't real over the longer term. So, no, I appreciate that insights. And those are actually go hand in glove with, kind of some of the topics we've got. So last time we spoke, we talked about this idea that the industry was in anticipating, right? That there was this supply and demand. We were hopeful that demand was going to pick up with the election printing and, potentially the third quarter, fourth quarter seasonality. But we also talked about the backdrop of mill closures, and that, this is your data, not mine, that, for the most part, most folks were either unsure of destocking had ran its course or absolutely agreed that destocking had ran its course. And a very small, less than 12% said that no, destocking was not over. And so, that was the first time I'd ever seen it put to numbers. And then as you look at some of the inventory data that we'll share here a little later, you can kind of see that, in fact, it would appear for the most part that destocking is over. There's absolutely, obviously, still some stock in the marketplace, especially with some of the larger national printers. It's evident that it's out there, and we'll talk to that a little bit. So for the most part, holding ourselves, to that standard, those all have come to pass. So let's jump into the macro level forces, right? You can't go anywhere these days, at least over the last, it seems like 2 weeks. It's been 2 months. The new administration's come in, whirlwind of transactions and executive orders, that have gone in, and kind of everyone's trying to figure out, what's the new playing field look like, right? Everyone is somewhat optimistic, especially if you talk to those that are in Washington, D.C. They talk about the amount of buzz and a positive way that's going on. And so let's talk about, let's start at the top, right? With the new administration coming in, and that really, there's a lot of folks that may look at, what's going on in Washington and not really understand that this is really stemming from the platform from which Trump, campaigned on, that those election themes are now turning absolutely into policy themes. And so those of you that were actually with us at the paper distribution conference last week, you'll recognize some of these slides. So Brian Wild, friend of mine from the National Association of Wholesalers, put this information together. And Brian's not just your average Joe. He used to serve as chief of staff of John Boehner when he was Speaker of the House, along with several other House members. And so he's been in politics his entire life. And so he has a really good read on kind of the inner workings, kind of behind the scenes in Washington, D.C. And his comments are this, right? That if you really think about it, Trump ran on this idea of, controlling inflation, improving safety, economic security, and obviously make America great again, or nationalism. And that those are really evolving from election themes into policy themes. And you're seeing that in the inflation. You're seeing it in a very much a pro-worker stance, right? Trump immediately came out and put his arms around the longshoremen. And probably the first Republican absolutely to do that, and actually to have the first Republican to have the Teamsters present at his inauguration. And so this idea of this pro-worker theme is putting the legacy Republican Party on its ear, if a little bit, but it is the new Republican Party going forward. He's absolutely molding it in his own image that he desires. You talk about from a safety standpoint, and that's really where you're seeing the immigration push come from, right? And that it's all about, police and, are people safe in bathrooms with regards to whether it's, transgender rights or whatnot. And then the economic security, you're seeing it show up in terms of national security, wages, in this era of imperialism. I know everyone thinks he's a little deranged in terms of what he's going after with regards to Greenland or Panama. But if you kind of peel back the onion and take your partisan hat off for a moment and kind of dig down, you'll realize that maybe he's not wrong about Panama. Maybe he's not wrong about Greenland, just in terms of their strategic importance to the United States. It's not he's out after world domination. There's some real logic and rationale behind that. And then, obviously getting to this nationalism to absolutely make America great so that the average American, it absolutely does, the lifting tide raises all boats. And so you're seeing that expressed in, those kinds of issues, right? And so obviously tariffs are at the top of everyone's list, especially for everyone that's on this call, especially from a supplier standpoint, or if you're importing raw materials from other, countries. Everyone wants to know what's going on with tariffs. If you've never read his book, The Art of the Deal, and you're trying to estimate, what is he up to, you have to really read the book to understand his negotiating tactics. Trump loves to negotiate with himself, and he loves to negotiate in a public setting. And so when you hear him say things, he's throwing them out there to understand, does this, statement have any legs to stand on? And he's always negotiating. He is always negotiating. And so I know, when the first talk of tariffs that, hey, Canada's going to see 25% tariffs, that's real and that's meaningful, especially for this industry, right? Everyone was scrambling. I talked to a friend of mine, and he's talking about, they were locked away for almost 2 weeks trying to figure out if 25% tariffs did hit, what would that mean for them? How would they have to pivot? What would they have to do? And so, it's absolutely been top of mind for everybody. I'll be the first to tell you, I don't know what's going to go on with tariffs, right? But I'll tell you, this is not flippant by any means, but if you want to get an idea of potentially what's going on with tariffs, go to a website called Polymarket. If you've never been there before, go to Polymarket. It's where you can it's not a survey site. You're actually laying your money on the line, and it is gambling on policy, right? And so generally speaking, these are the folks that have an informed opinion because they're putting dollars behind it. They're not just answering a poll. They're actually betting on these outcomes. So, will China see a tariff in the first 30 days? You can gamble on that. What percentage of a tariff will Trump impose on Canada? You'll see it there. And so, generally speaking, that site has a little bit more informed opinion because there's actual dollars behind it. So if you've never been to that site, it's absolutely something that's it's a great read, right? But if you think about from a tariff standpoint, who's the most exposed, right? And it's really our two North American trading partners, Mexico and Canada, right? And then if you think about whether it's a 10% tariff or a 25% tariff, it's going to be meaningful. There was a comment that was made. Brian made a comment that a 10% tariff in terms of the current administration, they believe a 10% tariff is nothing more than 4% is the valuation of the dollar. 4% is what a manufacturer should be able to absorb in cost cutting, and that really results in only a 2% being pushed along in terms of a price increase. That's honestly the way they're viewing a 10% tariff, that it'll ultimately, at the net, when it finds its way to the marketplace, it'll be nothing more than a 2% cost that the consumer then has to decide, product A versus product B with a 2% differential. That's their logic. All right. I'm not saying it's right. I'm just saying that's their logic stream. And so you're really starting to see this kind of play out. And I think everyone's kind of waiting around. And like I said, it's only been, a couple of weeks, but it feels like it's been a couple of months because, everyone knows the magnitude of these, tariffs and what they, can do to all of our individual businesses, both positive and negative. From a GDP standpoint, real GDP, actually the new number came out actually this morning, but there aren't any really good charts and graphs, so I left this one in here. The full year for last year, we were only at 2.5%, and that was a little bit disappointing as the fourth quarter only came in at 2.3% after being at 3.1 the previous 2 quarters. And we got to realize that the American consumer still accounts for 68% of the GDP. So it's the way we spend is, the way our country actually goes in terms of gross domestic product. But the one thing you'll notice is you're starting to see some changes. And so if you look on this side over here, so retail trade, obviously you're going into the third quarter, you would expect to see that, especially in the fourth quarter, retail leads the mark. But you're starting to see not only services, absolutely services have been here for a while, as well as government spending. Those have been 2 stalwarts, service spending and government spending. But you're starting to see some manufacturing start to at least level out, right? You're going to see that play out, and I'll show you here in a couple more slides where you can start to see that manufacturing is kind of got its footing, and it's kind of coming back out and starting to expand, which is a great thing for all of us, because at the end of the day, American manufacturing drives a lot of commercial print, whether that's in manuals, whether that's in labels, whether that's in packaging, whether that's in inserts in one way, shape, or form. Manufacturing and commercial print go hand in hand. And just yesterday, the interest rates, were held in check, right? So 5.5% was the terminal rate. Several rate cuts follow. We're now at 4.3. And again, tariffs are at the top of Chairman Jay Powell's mind, because obviously tariffs can impact inflation, which impact interest rates. And so they're really trying to get a sense for, what are the tariffs, what are their potentials, when will they be announced, and what will their effect be? And so, if you made the comment earlier about the amount of interest rate cuts and how that drives capital spending, everyone is absolutely looking forward to an additional, at least 1, maybe 2 more rate cuts this year. And so the timing of which, again, this is from a Wall Street Journal economic forecast survey that was literally just done the first part of this month. Looking at an April-May timeframe or that first June meeting is the 2 most likely candidates. So obviously, this last week didn't happen. Most likely will not happen in March. But as you get into April and May and into June is when the expectation, again, that's assuming that, the tariff implications are known and are not meaningful with regards to inflation. So that's the GDP side. So the other good news you're starting to see is that you're seeing the labor market come back into balance, right? And you're seeing that the unemployment rate and the number of job openings are kind of getting back to this pre-COVID level performance. So this is pre-COVID. This is obviously COVID through here. You can see we've kind of come back in balance. There's about 7.1 million unemployed and about 8 million job openings. So 1.13 jobs out there posted for every 1 employed person. But more importantly, the quit rate is improving, right? This was a big deal, especially a year and a half, 2 years ago, where people were just quitting their jobs, whether they had a job lined up yet or not. You're seeing that come back into historical trends. So this should be good news for all of us, whether you're, a printer, whether you're a manufacturer, or whether you're a fellow distributor or you're a print end user salesperson. The labor market is absolutely meaningful in terms of being able to attract and retain talent. And speaking of talent, the return to work. This is another area where Trump's fingerprints are a little bit all over it. If you have a federal worker in your household that maybe has been working from home for a period of time, you know very well that just this past week there was an executive order requiring a return to work. And then even looking at even more so than that, if you didn't want to come back to work, that you could get 8 months pay in exchange for basically, giving up your job as a way of scaling back the government. And so, this idea of, and why do I always talk about return to work? Because, there's a simple saying, if you're looking, especially when I was in the capital projects, we didn't have to be good in the late 90s forecasting demand. We just needed to know white collar employment. You tell me what white collar employment is, you tell me what GDP is, I'll tell you what print's going to do. It's not that way anymore, but there are still some loose affiliations. And so seeing employees come back to the work site absolutely does mean more consumption of paper and print. And so we'll see how this plays out, especially as, this executive order with the federal government. Because right now, even on its best day, only 58% of the people are back in the office. And on average, it's about, it's less than half at 47.7. All right, so let's talk about some good news, right? And so this is ISM's Purchasing Manager Index for manufacturing. So PMI manufacturing, any number below 50 would indicate that U.S. manufacturing is in contraction. And so what you'll really see here is we've really been in a contracting state other than the month of March of last year, going all the way back to the third quarter of 2022. If only we would have known, right, amidst the highs and lows of moratorium and allocation, that all we had to do was pay attention to this to understand the bubble was coming, right? When you see manufacturing kind of going in the tank, we all, were feeling really good even through the first quarter of 23. And it wasn't until the first quarter of 23 that we all understood that paper and print demand were going to fall off, in terms of the need for destocking. PMI really called that shot all the way back into the, call it September, October timeframe of 2022. And so that's why I like this view. Just from the standpoint, it helps me understand really what's going on with American manufacturing. And you can see, we're at 49.3. It's not great. It's still below 50, but I want you to pay attention to this trend line here, right? And so remember, this is an index, which is a composite of several other factors at play, of which you're seeing them listed here on the on the right-hand side. So yes, it's contracting, but the rate of change is slower. But look at the new orders and look at production. So for either the first or second month, we are seeing new orders are growing at a faster pace. For a 2-month trend, we're seeing production growing, which is a new change. It was just contracting last month. And you're seeing customer inventories being too low. So again, this would be good signs. This would tell me it would look like the basement is in with regards to American manufacturing, and you're starting to see this. This is why I use the word transition, that American manufacturing is transitioning out and coming back into a growth mode, right? That's what this data would indicate. And then if I compare this to the next one, this is the Conference Board's leading economic index. Same kind of data sets spun a little bit differently. They have a little different weighting, but it would say, that, again, very similar situation. If we had just been paying attention to this as an industry, we just saw once we crossed that zero line, guess what? It was probably about September, October 2022 when it crossed, right? And we've kind of been in this depressed state for quite some time. Every time you see this red, it means there's a higher probability of recession. It's a warning sign for recession. But what you're seeing is The tip is moving up. The trend line is moving up. And so we are coming out of the basement. So the basement is absolutely in, and we're coming off. And again, the expectation is that we are absolutely transitioning into a growth phase, right? And you're seeing that in terms of, credit indexes. You're seeing it in the S&P 500. And you're starting to see less and less in terms of the negative side, in terms of some of the manufacturing space. So would tell me, again, the leading indicators would be American manufacturing is improving. The overall leading economic indicators are improving. If I look at the freight side of the business, because obviously freight's very important, freight's very stable right now. If I look at the average truckload rate, it's about $2.30 a mile across the country. And the load to truck ratio is about 3.4, which is well below the 5.45 year average. And then if I look at that price of diesel, it's down, 1.6%. But again, one of the executive orders, one of the very first executive orders of the Trump administration was really unleashing American, refining capacity and drilling, right? And so I would expect this number to continue to go down over the next several months. And then the one thing, though, that keeps me up at night and keeps all of us up at Millcraft up overnight is really ocean cargo, right? This is the one that has the highest kind of probability for volatility, just from the standpoint of as an industry, we get somewhere between 30 and 40% of our coated free sheet products come from offshore, right? About 15% of uncoated free sheet. But there's also a lot of other raw materials that come from overseas. So even though someone may be making uncoated free sheet in the States, they may be getting color formers from Southeast Asia. They may be getting specialty pulps from somewhere else. And so this idea of global trade is very important. And so looking at ocean cargo rates is, again, it's one of those things that gives you cause for concern, right? So this is the Drury Index. This is an index of, what does it cost for a 40-foot container globally, right? And so it's a great number. It's a great proxy to keep in your head. Right now, it's around $34.45 for a 40-foot container. What does that mean in terms of paper? It's about a $7.83 a hundredweight is what the cost is. Well, just 6 months ago, that number was much, much higher, right? It was $13.64 a hundredweight. And so, you think about the deals that are maybe being made right now while the number's here. Will those same deals be around when the number gets back up to here? Because it's coming, right? It's coming as the global economy picks up, as China is still very depressed, as is Europe, by the way. As those two economies really start to pick up, you're going to see more container ships go the other way. Right now, the U.S. is the largest, most stable economy in the world. Everyone wants their products coming here. As those economies start to wake back up or kind of go back into a growth mode, you'll see things start to level out. You will see freight rates go back up. Moreover, there's all these other issues we've got to deal with regard to ocean cargo, right? Panama Canal. Again, I know people think that Trump's a madman talking about how do you go back on a 1977 treaty. The reality is, we gave it away after we spent somewhere in today's dollars, about $15 billion is what the U.S. spent to build the Panama Canal. More importantly, it is our lifeblood to get our military from coast to coast, as well as all the goods from coast to coast. And whether you realize it or appreciate it or not, several Chinese entities have bought bridges that span the canal and several ports that are intermediate points along the canal. And periodically, they will disrupt the trade flow because they'll shut down a port or they'll shut down a bridge for construction, which slows the flow through the canal. And so that's why you saw the Senate hearings that kicked off on Tuesday, Senator Ted Cruz, and it was all around the safety and national security of the Panama Canal in terms of what it means for the American economy, the American national security. We still have Red Sea Houthi rebels. They're still there, right? You're still seeing, container ships kind of go around the Cape of Good Horn, right? Now's the good time of year because obviously they're experiencing summer in the southern hemisphere. Obviously there's the tariff trade. There was a tremendous amount of front loading of imports ahead of once the election results were understood. Not only the East Coast longshoreman strike, everybody was trying to get their product on shore as fast as possible so they weren't exposed to tariffs and they weren't exposed to any potential longshoreman strike. And so right now there's a glut of inventory, right, that's come, but it's not going to be backed up for probably another 5 or 6 weeks. And so there's going to be a little bit of a valley. You'll see that in terms of we talk about when we get to the import slide. And then, oh, by the way, there's this Lunar New Year that's going to go on here in about 2 weeks, where the better part of China shuts down. They don't need to ship, they don't need to receive. And so, again, it disrupts global trade flows. And then all of a sudden, when they kick back in, all of a sudden, they're going to be mass exporters. And so you'll see all the container ships really flock to China to get product out. And so these are all the things that really manipulate this number up here that absolutely do have a meaningful impact on our industry. And that wasn't cause for concern enough, right? This is another area of concern for all of us, right? And it's the U.S. Postal Service. This is obviously, there's been 6 postal increases since 2021, and it's way faster rate than inflation. And the reason this is important, because this is, people ask me all the time, why do you care so much about the Postal Service? Well, it's about 39% of the graphic paper industry flows through the Postal Service, right? That's a big number, $6.5 billion. That's how big the impact is. And so that's why we all need to be clued in what's going on in the Postal Service, right? Will Postmaster DeJoy still have a job, in another couple of weeks after some of the Postal Commission representatives get changed out? I don't know. But here's the reality. Distribution or postal costs, right, are 70% of advertising costs. And if I just looked at coded and I just said, we'll use a proxy of coded number 3 web going through the U.S. mail service, right? Well, that cost is up 43% just from in terms of all the cost increases that we've had as an industry since 2020. But postage is up 73 to 96, well above inflation and well above paper. So when I talk to my postal friends, they'll say, but paper's up just as much. No, it's not. Right? Postal increases are off the charts. As an industry, we got a reprieve. There was no increase, in this past January. And so I know Joe Baglione and Mark Keller are probably clapping right now because that obviously impacts, envelopes, right? Is another one coming in July? I don't know. They've already signaled that there is. And again, it absolutely hurts graphic paper demand. And so, again, for all those reasons and more, this is why I'm a firm believer, at least right now, that I truly believe we're out of this, we're moving out of contraction phase, and we're transitioning into recovery phase, right? And unfortunately, though, this cycle is kind of like being on, for those of you that love amusement park rides and roller coasters, this is like being on a roller coaster, right? And so right now, the lead car is in transition and it's recovering. Right. But unfortunately, some of the trailing cars, they're still going through the transaction. So it depends on where you are. So I'm trying to paint that picture for you mentally. Right. Depending on where you are in the car. Right. You may be seeing signs of transition or you may be seeing the trough of contraction still. But as an industry, I truly believe we are transitioning up and out of the contraction phase and getting into recovery phase. So enough of me talking. Right. So I'd love to hear from you. What forces are preventing your business from achieving next level success? And so, yes, I have intentionally left that as wide open and as ambiguous as possible so you can answer however you think best, right? But let's love to know what forces, are preventing your business from achieving next level success. And are you guys able to respond to that one, or is it not coming in?
So we've got
Kim,
everyone.
are you able to see that?
We've got
Court?
everyone muted. I was going to say we have everyone
Okay.
muted. So if you can type in the chat if you guys can't. So Greg, I'm having a problem with it, but I think it's because I was on the earlier one.
Got it.
Kim had said she was okay.
Okay. We must be still, I'm still on the, stick to the first question.
Yeah, stuck on the first question still.
Okay. Sorry.
It's so finicky at times.
Oh, I know.
Yeah. And there's one for printers and end users, and that's what mine's stuck on, Greg. So a couple are stuck on the first question and others are at printers and end users.
Okay. We'll skip over and we could always double back, and I'd love anything in the
And they
chat.
said it just loaded.
Oh, it just loaded. Wonderful. Okay.
And we got other people saying loaded. I don't know if you want to go back a slide.
Yeah. All right. Well, force to prevent your business from achieving imports, customer uncertainty. Love that one. Low priced imports, workforce, rising costs, cost to operate. It's a good one. Skilled labor, increased cost to clients, workforce, tariff threat and postage increases. Yeah, absolutely. People not willing to do a capital expansion. Yep, that's high costs, labor shortage, rising costs. Awesome. You guys can continue to answer. And again, as part of when we send the presentation out, we always try to make sure all these polls, their responses are included. Again, this is the value in my mind of declining margins. You know, that's a spot on. Slow market. That's the value of having, you know, us all together as a community and responding to understand, make sure we're seeing things. So let's talk about printer markets. Just some overall, so I'm going to share with you some things from whattheythink.com as well as some NAPCO data. You know, November shipments actually fell 10% month over month from October down to its poorest showing in the last 5 years. And so, you know, that data point right there. So we're still waiting on the December data, but I would say that, you know, absolutely the market, you know, kind of went from what was the second best October in the last 5 years to the absolute worst November in 5 years. And so again, part of that choppiness that we all see and that you all are reflecting in terms of, you know, some of the words that you use are describing the industry. The one thing I think is interesting though is again, this was a NAPCO research done in the, you know, the late third quarter, early fourth quarter of 24. It was sponsored by Canon, but it really talks about, you know, looking forward to the upcoming year. And so commercial printers planning on making capital investments. And so their data set would say 70% of commercial printers were actually looking to make capital investments. And so this is why having that view of interest rates is important, because obviously if you wait a quarter and waiting for, you know, quarter percentage point rate drop, obviously it's meaningful for you. And so this is, you know, capital investments are absolutely on the minds of most printers. And then adding that ability to either add capacity or lower cost through automation and or productivity gains is paramount. You know, and then more importantly, if I look at books, so this is a great one, right? So I used to be in the line of sight to the book printing community. This is one where, you know, it was kind of a little bit left for dead. Everyone said the Kindle and the iPad would kill books. Not the case. Not the case at all, right? Book printing is actually, it is still important. It's about almost 3% of the uncoated free sheet market. And it's actually expecting to see a 4% CAGR, compound annual growth rate, over the next 3 years, really as these Gen X and millennials actually realize they prefer printed books. And so that's an interesting statistic, and especially in this era of, TikTok, right? So there's such a thing, this is when TikTok launches. This is a great slide from our friends at the Paper and Packaging Board. Their data would show that, when TikTok launched in 2018, this is where book sales were really headed, and everyone was, looking at the doom and gloom of the book industry. Obviously, as we all know, when COVID hit, everyone got off their screens and started reading a good book. That's just the reality. And that extended into 21. But you're also now seeing these podcasts, like Book Talk, where they're going to review a book every week. And more importantly, ByteDance, who's the owner of TikTok, believes in printed books so much that they now own an independent book publisher called Eighth Note Press, and they will launch their first printed book this coming spring. And so again, it's one of those areas where, print and paper and the haptics of those two combined are absolutely important. They are absolutely meaningful, and really, print, especially books, are absolutely having their moment right now. You can kind of see it in, the graphic here with Hoda and Jenna. Obviously, everyone knows about, Oprah's book clubs, but, it's becoming much more than just a passing fad. It is the preferred way in which, the next generation really wants to experience and kind of read a book. And more importantly, direct mail is rebounding too, right? This is the other interesting fact that, 64% of marketers expect to actually increase their direct mail budgets from last year, because everyone knows that direct mail has a 2x response rate over email, right? And so you're really starting to see this, in an era of kind of social media mistrust and misinformation. Direct mail evokes, authenticity and reliability. And so you're really starting to see direct mail, really come back. And this is why postal rates are important, because, as an industry, as we all know, we were all anticipating that direct mail would, outlast just about every other aspect of print. And, it's been, seen damage done because of the postal rate increases. And then really just in terms of overall, so I love the way that Andrew Paparazzi, the chief economist over Printing United, he put it, that this upcoming rising tide no longer lifts all boats, right? So this concept of a rising tide raises all boats, not the truth anymore, right? Every industry executive should be asking, how are we preparing to participate in the upturn, right? So I love that self-reflection. What are you doing to help your business to be prepared, right, to participate when the upturn opportunity presents itself? Right. So I think that's really where, as we all need to be looking about in terms of whether it's capital investments, whether it's hiring and training the next generation of talent, whether it's retooling, whether it's streamlining, whether it's taking out costs, looking at automation. There are absolutely things that we can absolutely do to prepare to really participate and really benefit from the upturn that looks like it's on the horizon. So obviously from, again, some of you guys are well ahead now that we've got this one back on track, right? So printers and end users, for your key customers, want to know, are they increasing their print spend year over year? What primary factors do they cite, if not, right? And so obviously increased postage and shipping are at the top of that list, and other is the second biggest category. And so maybe in the chat, those of you that put other, I'd love to kind of peel back that onion and just kind of get a better sense of, what are those other factors that maybe we weren't, really considering in the mix. So again, great data. And again, we will absolutely get this all back out when we send out the deck. So let's turn the page to, the actual paper side of the business, right? And so you're going to hear me use terms, printing and writing grades. And so I use this simple primer, if you will, just to make sure I'm not talking over someone. You're going to hear me talk about printing and writing grades, and they're really comprised of 4 different grades, right? And they're all based on the premise of, is there coating involved? Yes or no, which makes that glossy surface. And then has the lignin been taken out of the fiber themselves? The lignin is the kind of the yellow super glue that holds the tree together. That's also the thing that causes reversion when you see a newspaper sitting in the sunlight all day long. And so free sheet, whether it's coated or uncoated, has that lignin removed. And so those are the two grades that you're going to hear me mainly talk about because they represent by far and away the largest aspects of the printing and writing industry. But all those other grades, the uncoated groundwood and coated groundwood, absolutely have a space. And some of them are actually having a little bit of a renaissance as, you know, some of the cost structure in the free sheet side of whether it's coated or uncoated are getting a little too much for some end users to swallow. Groundwoods make great alternatives, and again, is that fit for purpose print is absolutely meaningful. So let's get into the numbers, right? So this is the demand side. So this top line, this purple line, this is uncoated free sheet. So this is your copy paper. This is the items that go into white wove envelopes. And you can see that, you know, we're really been somewhat flat. We're at 5.4 million tons market in 23. We're a 5.55 million ton market in 24. But look, this was the depths of COVID, right? While the high of February and kind of the rise in the second half got you to 6.3. We are in the worst days of COVID is where our new demand is as an industry. And that's just a reality we all need to come to grips with. And that's why you've seen a lot of the supply side moves that are out there. And then from a coated free sheet, right? So this is a very similar story, right? Go back to the depths of the market, right? And that's about where we are. But the good news is there was a little bit of renaissance last year in the coated side of the business, right? The election print cycle was absolutely evident, whether or not you individually or collectively participate in it. But coated free sheet was actually up. Consumption was up 18% year over year, while uncoated was only up 2.7%. And so, you know, this is where the new kind of demand pattern looks to be. And the good news is destocking is over. And so these look like durable demand patterns. And as a result, you're going to see, you know, mill closures and conversions to try to help balance that out with. And that's really what you saw the back half of last year. Obviously, Sappy Somerset PM2, that conversion was on the horizon for a couple of years as they convert that machine from making graphics grades over to packaging grades, and then trying to leave some capacity to be able to swing between the two. And then you really saw the big one was International Paper just shuttering the Georgetown mill in total. That was 300,000 tons. And so in total, all those, you know, those moves, those 5 moves, that's 1 million tons of capacity removed from the North American printing and writing grades. It's about 22% of the coated North American supply and about 12% of the uncoated supply. And so, again, this is one of those areas where trying to make sure that you're really understanding, are you aligned with the right supply chain partner? You know, and, you know, are they able to protect and secure your partner, your source of supply going forward? These are the kinds of things that are going to continue to happen, just as the industry tries to keep supply and demand in balance. And really what you're seeing as a result, there's not that much inventory. So as these mill closures occurred, you know, you're still seeing uncoated free sheet at only 31 days inventory on hand. If I go back in time, that 31 days would have been closer to about 45 days pre-COVID. So what you can't see here is if I were to extend this chart back in time and look at 2017 and 2018, the industry on average would have carried about 45 days of inventory on hand in uncoated free sheet. Now they're carrying 31. Well, where did the inventory go? We'll talk about that here in a second. You know, from a coated free sheet side, you're only at 36 days. It's on a second axis, right? So don't get excited. This one is actually on this axis over here. It's on the right axis just because there's these wild swings, right? So during COVID, you know, the inventory went crazy. So you're talking 120 days of inventory during the heights of COVID. But historically, they would have been around 65 to 70 days of inventory. That would have been the norm. So again, the inventory has left the mills and it's been pushed out to the front end of the supply chain. And so that's why you're seeing merchants and distributors become much more, important going forward, because they're carrying sizable amounts of the inventory that exists in the supply chain. And so, yes, I said, early on that this is a look at printer inventories over here. So yes, we're still at some elevated levels. But again, these are a lot of national account players, and some of the major regionals are still carrying a little bit of inventory, as they were expecting a little bit of a bounce from the election cycle last year. So I know a lot of people got after their coated 9-point and really put it in stock, hoping, kind of betting on the come of a big presidential election cycle. On the merchant side, you're really seeing inventory levels at dangerously low levels, right? So even though the inventory has been kind of pushed out to distributors from a day's inventory on hand, because this is looking at, dollars of inventory. This is just real net dollars. It's still very, very low. And so as a result, the National Paper Trade Association, we kind of launched a study last year looking at, so where did the inventory go? So if the mills no longer have the inventory, who has that inventory? Well, it turns out in a lot of cases, it's the merchants. So that's what you're seeing in PTA. That represents the merchant community. So on the uncoated free sheet side, I apologize, I do not have the fourth quarter data yet. It'll come in later this week. But the mills are carrying about 45 days of inventory. You saw on the previous slide that actually the new number is 31 days. You're seeing about an equal number from the merchant community. But look on the coated side. Remember, that number was about 36 days on manufacturers both in the U.S. and across North America on the coated free sheet side. That number is 68 in the merchants. So merchants are carrying somewhere between 35 and 40% of all the inventory that exists in the supply chain. And so that's why this study is extremely important, because one of the lessons learned from COVID was a lot of the mills, to leverage working capital, they closed their RDCs and changed their minimum order requirements, where merchants, it's meaningful now, the merchant inventory. All right. And you're seeing slower operating rates as well, right? So not only you're seeing shutters, but you're seeing that the mills are comfortable living through depressed eras of operating rates. So what's an operating rate? If I can operate that machine and make 100 tons today, but I'm going to slow it back because I don't have 100 tons worth of orders, I've only got 70, I'm now operating at 70%, right? And in general, a mill never operates at 100%. They generally operate in that 90 to 92. That's considered full. Right. And you see price increases in general when you get into this green band. This means that the marketplace is full. And so you kind of saw that late last year. And so that's a little bit of the logic and reasoning why you saw some of the price increase announcements that you saw get announced. But then you see this dramatic drop, in December. So we'll see, how, the adoption rate of the uncoated free sheet increase happens. But this is also why, an uncoated free sheet price increase probably isn't likely anytime soon on the sheet side of the business. This is only looking at sheets, not looking at rolls. Okay. And then, as I said, imports, you saw this run up in imports, right? And now you're going to see that they've crested and they're going to come back down. Why? Because everyone was scared of tariffs, so they were trying to get them into the states ahead of tariffs, and they were concerned about the East Coast port strike, get it in before the port strike. So you're going to see probably 4 or 5 months now where this number declines, and as this inventory starts to get burned off. And so again, it's one of those areas, paying attention to your supply chain partners and making sure you're not putting yourself at risk as this inventory levels kind of come back to their longer term trends. So as I look at the outlook for 25, right, you're seeing demand kind of be, steady, maybe potentially up if U.S. manufacturing picks back up. And from a supply side, obviously, 1 million tons of capacity taken offline last year. What does that mean, right? Are imports able to fill that gap? What happens with tariffs? Don't know, right? And you're going to continue to see this exodus of graphic papers, moving to packaging in this plastic-free environment. So let's talk about what lies ahead in 25. What do you think? So what's your forecast for 2025? Are you forecasting growth or parity with 24 or a decline? And hopefully we're not having problems with this one either. We may be. Go back and activate it. Oh, sorry. There we go. That make a difference? Awesome. I can see it on my screen, but unfortunately you can't see it on this one. There we go. 5 to 10% growth. 50% of the folks think that. Awesome. 6% thinking decline. 25% parity. And again, this is the power of this community in terms of helping, understanding, getting a lay of the land for really what's going on. Awesome. So about 41% think 5 to 10% growth, 32% parity, 27% less than 5% growth. Perfect. Again, we'll make sure all these statistics kind of get out, to you. Just for the sake of time, I'll just, kind of switch gears. I always talk about this, what I truly believe is a prescription for success. It's partnership, it's collaboration, holding annual business reviews. And why do I say that? This is even more so. So there was a snippet from the conference board that talked about, looking at global CEOs and talking about, there's a big increase in the U.S. CEOs. 71% are looking and planning to alter their supply chains in the next 3 to 5 years. That's well up from 54%. So why? What's the reason, right? Well, about 80% of those are looking to alter their supply chains, doing so to lower costs, as well as lower the risk of supply chain disruptions. And that's real, folks. Just in terms of all the, we're talking about all the ocean issues that you got going on. You got all the geopolitical issues that are going on, the implications of potential tariffs. And that's why at the end of the day, supply chain partners absolutely do matter. And quite candidly, I've been with Millcraft for what is coming up on 13 years. I've never had the level of inquiry from our best customers saying, I want to get into a long-term supply agreement. I don't want to have to worry, am I going to be shut out if there is, an opportunity to really take advantage of a growing market and I'm left on the sidelines because I can't get sourcing. Right. And so we're starting to see that. We're seeing a major multinational saying, I just want to make the life easier for my team. You guys choose the right supply chain partners and let's partner together and let's hold ourselves to, some kind of indexed cost structure so that I know that I am competitive, but I'm not wasting my time and resources shopping from one to the next. And, I'm actually, paying a whole organization to do nothing more than sourcing when, in fact, an index would actually be the best response. And so, again, we are seeing more of that collaboration, probably more so than ever, even kind of coming out of COVID. And then, obviously, as you know, decomplexifying, looking at your grades, structure, and then visibility. I don't know how many of you are tied with end-to-end connectivity. We just went through a major ERP upgrade last year, and one of our biggest initiatives coming out of it is how do we get aligned with our supply chain partners so that we all see end-to-end visibility of demand as well as supply. Again, so how do we make sure that it's the best supply chain, because that's the one that's the most durable. Obviously, there's wild cards in the mix. Where are interest rates headed? Where's Congress headed? Are they going to reassert themselves? Obviously, Chairman Xi, what's going to happen there? And then, global conflicts across the world, right? This is what's holding European production and demand patterns down, quite candidly. Do they return to some level of normalcy if the situation in the Middle East looks like it's solidifying? And what happens if Ukraine gets settled? What does that mean for the global markets with regards to European ties? And then obviously it is the trump card, literally and figuratively, right? What's going on with tariffs? What's going on with economic policy? Where's the next executive order coming that we all need to be able to react and kind of ebb and flow with. And so these are absolutely wild cards in some of the things that we've talked about. So, I wouldn't be doing my job if I wasn't, giving you a 30-second spin on Millcraft. As I said, we spent a lot of time, effort, and energy last year putting a brand new state-of-the-art ERP in, all with the expectation that we're integrating with our partners, both on the customer side as well as our supplier side, to make the lives of our partners easier, right? To take out cost, take out complexity, improve performance, and make it a robust, durable, sustainable solution. And so, if you're not currently a Millcraft customer, would love to have a candid conversation with you to understand, how we could, change your mind, because I truly believe Millcraft has an incredible competitive advantage. Last thing before we wrap up is sustainability, because I know this is on top of everyone's minds. I hear it. I see a lot of printers coming up with their own standardization of, our new standard of sustainability is X, Y, or Z. And it's because a lot of people don't have a really good way of thinking about sustainability. So I want to leave you with a couple of resources that you please investigate on your own. So How Life Unfolds, it's part of the Paper and Packaging Board. Wonderful resources, as well as Two Sides North America. It's Two Sides. twosidesna.org, right? Two great resources for you that will help you truly tell the other side of the story. Because here's the reality, folks. Talk about sustainability. There is nothing more sustainable than paper and print and packaged paper, right? 69% of paper and 71 to 76% of cardboard corrugated is recycled, right? We're recycling 60% more than we did in 1990, right? And the reality is in 2023, the recycling rate was 65 to 69%. There isn't another material on the planet that's recycled as much as paper, right? Most cardboard boxes are made from 70 to 100% recycled material. More importantly, about 2/3 of the energy that most domestic manufacturers use, they make it themselves by burning the biomass, right? The industry uses more renewable energy than any other industrial sector. 2018 report talked about, the mills generate enough electricity, enough energy that they actually sell it back to the grid, right? And there are some ways that, we combat climate change. We're only responsible for 1% of the carbon emissions, right? Everyone thinks that, paper mills are bad, right? It's only 1% of carbon emissions, and we actually reduced our greenhouse gas emissions by 20% since 2005. There is not a more sustainable story, in the industry other than paper and paper-based packaging. And so, would love to help you tell that story with their end users and with your print customers, because collectively, we're all in this together, and, we have a great story to tell. And sometimes we're just not educated enough, or we're not good enough storytellers to truly tell that sustainability message. And so that's my personal mission this year, is to help empower, our customers, our clients, and our suppliers tell the sustainability story of this wonderful industry. So obviously, I truly believe, I'm passionate. I believe this industry is transitioning. I think the better days are absolutely ahead. Economic activity is mixed, yes, but manufacturing looks like it's reemerging, right? Destocking is over. Inflation looks like it's in check, pending tariffs, right? Interest rates are moving in a good way. Postal rates obviously have destroyed demand. There's no doubt about that. But we'll see if there's a new PNG on the horizon. And import levels, again, I'm expecting probably you're going to see 3 to 4 months of a decline as the imports kind of fall back in line, and you're going to continue to see suppliers take that balancing act of supply and demand. And then partnership transparency. And this is my last comment that goes back to that, building, whether it's supply agreements, protecting our customer supply chain. I believe that's the job of every distributor out there. I know a lot of folks in this industry, and they do a wonderful job. That is our job, is to make sure that we're offering up the best, long-term sustainable solution that ultimately results in the lowest total cost of ownership. All right, that's it. I know I'm a couple of minutes over. I didn't know if we had any time for questions, Kim, or if we've got any in the chat or not.
Yeah, let's take a look here. If anybody has any questions, we can stay on for another moment. But let's take a look here. All right. I'm not seeing any questions come through, Greg. All right, we have someone mentioning new legislation is being implemented in Europe later this year. I don't know if you want to talk about that at all.
Yeah, so that's a great one. So we actually talked a little bit about last quarter. It's called European Union Deforestation Regulation, EUDR. It's been put on hold. So, we all have a reprieve basically for a year. It has the potential, quite candidly, for, I don't want to say upending SFI and FSC, but a lot of the elements of that program are duplicitous with FSC and SFI, and probably have a little more far-reaching and probably better consequences as a result in terms of getting the long-term scenarios to play out. But yeah, there's a lot more to unpack there. There's a lot of the biggest issue with that piece of legislation is that it requires the ability to geoposition where your fiber came from. That's a tall order, meaning I've got to be able to show you this is the geoplot of land where this fiber came from that's making your box or that made your book. That is a very tall order just because of the way supply chains are built in this industry. About 60% of the fiber base doesn't come in longwood. It actually comes in the form of chips. And so chips, by the time they get to a wood yard, they're all over the place and you don't really know where they end up. So I can tell you, it's coming out of North America. I just can't give you a geoplot in terms of what it's asking for. It's aimed at the right reason because it's trying to make sure we're not, logging, boreal forests and rainforests and doing destructive harm to the land. The reality is that doesn't happen in North America, by the way. We're talking about generally third world country issues. And so that's part of the issue is the legislation was put out a little prematurely. It's not fully baked. And it was treating everybody equally in terms of the requirements. And the reality is that's probably not fair in terms of considering everybody to be an equal risk. And so great question. There's a lot to unpack there. And as we get closer to next fall's implementation, we'll probably absolutely do a whole feature on that just because it has far-reaching implications, not only for manufacturers and distributors, but absolutely if I'm producing a book or if I'm importing that product, that printed piece, I'm the one that's on the hook. Whoever the importer of record is on the hook for making sure that the fines are paid, the taxes are paid. Probably
Awesome.
way more than that person was asking for, but there's a lot to unpack there.
No, that's great. We do have another question. It looks like we do have quite a few people still on. So for those who are, still on and want to listen in, we'll go ahead and answer this question. So if FSC SFI is the answer, do we foresee greater availability of lower MOQs for that type of order as a result once that's implemented, or will American supply make some opportunities out of reach?
Yeah, a little bit to unpack there too. So let's start with FSC because that's a little more onerous, if you will. So the issue is if I'm a landowner, and so think about in North America, especially the United States, about 85% of forest lands in the United States, they're owned by people. They're owned by mom and pops, right? It's a generational farm that's been handed down. And now all of a sudden someone says, if you want to sell your fiber to, the local sawmill or whatnot, you've got to get it certified. Now it means I got to pay somebody to come out and tell me how to do what I've been doing for 2 and 3 generations. And so it's a little bit onerous on the landowner. It's easier if you're a mega landowner. If you have huge swaths of land where there's provincial lands up in Canada, it's easy to get tracts, thousands and thousand acre tracts, certified very easily because it's a provincial ownership that's taking place, or maybe it's a corporate ownership. It's very fragmented when you get into the United States. And so that's why you see the SFI standard be a little easier to grasp, just because SFI standard actually came out of the American Tree Farm System, which has been around since the 50s. And most folks that had forest lands, they were members of the American Tree Farm because it was simply the right thing to do, not that they thought they were going to get rich off of it. And so being certified has its advantages, absolutely, but it also absolutely has its costs. I mean, we have costs. Obviously the landowner has a cost, the paper mill has a cost, the distributor has a cost, the printer may or may not have a cost, and it rolls up, and you're going to see that implication of those cost structures and the fees that ultimately the end user's going to have to pay. And again, the question you got to ask is that worthwhile? Is that meaningful? There are other avenues out there, and so you're really seeing the industry trying to understand as EcoVadis. So there's a new certification that's out there called EcoVadis. Does it do a better job of being protecting the environment, making sure everything is done the right way, but not being as onerous and not being as kind of overarching and demanding? And so there's still some things to be done. There's obviously blockchain technology too. That's really cool, has some really cool applications. So you're seeing this industry that's really in trying to understand, everyone's doing FSC for the sake of it's rubber stamping it. We question ourselves all the time. Is it worthwhile for us to continue to do this? It's expensive for us to do this. We have to get certified and recertified every year. The amount of paperwork that goes through it. And at the end of the day, we're buying product that's already come from the forest and we're reselling. It's not like we're doing something to it, but that's just the way the standard's written. And so it's a little bit of a, it's the onerous aspect of it. And does it really achieve what it's trying to achieve, or is it just a brand that, someone's looking for a seal versus is it really driving the right behaviors, is really the question. So I know I went around Robin Hood's barn answering that. I don't know that there's a great answer. I just do know that FSC has a cost, and that cost is going to get rolled up, and it will be passed along the supply chain. That's an unfortunate reality.
Thanks, Greg. I'm not seeing any other questions in the chat. We do have mics live, so if anyone wants to ask a question live, you may do so right now. All right, well, looks like we have Joe with his hand up. Joe, go ahead.
Thank you. Hey, Greg, great job. Thanks a lot. This might be a little bit crystal ballish, but to our knowledge, this was the first year that the USPS introduced an environmental angle on postage savings. Have you had any intel on, is there going to be more of that to come in future years, and anything you can share along those lines?
Yes. So it's a great comment. I knew they were doing it. I honestly didn't. I forgot they were implementing it, quite candidly. So I'm glad you mentioned it. The Postal Service completely appreciates the fact that the Gen Z millennials, they don't know how to think about sustainability of paper. And so the Postal Service is trying to do a better job of touting the sustainability aspects of paper. And obviously paper with print. And so this is one way they're trying to understand if they can come up with a program where they can give cost savings along the ride and highlight the aspects of it. But other than that, I knew the program was headed. I don't know how they're implementing, quite candidly, Joe. I wish I was more in tune with you in terms of what it means to the envelope marketplace. But it's a great angle, and it's obviously something I made myself a note here that I'm going to follow up on.
Great, thank you.
Unless there's someone else that's on the line, again, that's part of the beauty of this group is the community of users here. And someone else in the audience, knows that, a better angle of approach. Joe, I'll follow up with my contacts at MTAC and get you some feedback, and then actually we'll put it in the notes as we send out this presentation.
Great. We'll include it in the business review as well.
Awesome. While we're here, if anybody else has a question, feel free to shout it out. Oh, we have David. Go ahead, David. Oh, he had his hand raised. David, you there?
David, I think you're on mute. I can see you talking, but I think you're on mute still.
We need to unmute him.
No, he actually doesn't have a microphone showing as muted, so it might be a system setting on his end. Yep, no problem. Sometimes those speaker settings, when we switch from earbuds to back to the computer, I think we might be there.
Yeah, my Scarlett
Yes,
should be
there you
picking
are.
you up quite well, actually, but I'm
There
not.
you go.
Yeah, I had the speaker set to 1 and the input set to the Scarlett. Sorry. We're seeing an awful lot of box grades infiltrating into traditional printing and writing grade applications. And I'm curious if you're getting a bunch of that on the distributor side as well. I'm on the manufacturing side, where we make the engines that drive these applications, and I'm having some real, it used to be just printing and writing grades, life was easy. Now I'm getting this incredible variety of, I've got this SBS that's coming from Argentina, so, and it's creating some challenges. What are you guys seeing on the distribution side? Same demand? Is it just demand for the thickness and the weight since printing and writing grades are being converted to corrugated, or what?
It's a great question, David. Yes, absolutely. You're seeing it's all about the yield, and you're seeing there are several European manufacturers that have the ability to play. So if you think about especially a board sheet, most of the boards that are made in the United States, they're solid bleached sulfate, right? They're the true SBS. It's all one big comes out of the head box, one slot head box. The Europeans have multiple head boxes, and so they can actually play with what the fiber looks like in the middle plies. And so they'll, I don't want to say cheapen it up, but they will put in value added, or value efficient and, cost effective and high yielding products in between. So a lot of times you'll see free sheet top and bottom, but then you'll see groundwood containing product in the middle plies, because it bulks better, because that lignin that I talked about, the super glue, acts like stilts. And so now I get that bulking characteristic. So at the end of the day, I have a 8-point or a 10-point product, or even a 20-point product that looks like, it's 20%, 30% savings from a basis weight standpoint, because I'm able to make this thing bulk and hit a bulk characteristic, but the fiber is not there. And so you're absolutely seeing that, especially as packaging grades came into the United States and people realized, hang on, I can use that, that FBB, that folding boxboard grade, and I can put it on what was a legacy, commercial printing SBS grade. So over time, the things you got to watch out for is obviously debris, right? Because all those middle plies, you've got, groundwood fibers in there, and you're hoping that they've got, internal bond strength that's, structurally sound enough. And so, if David, I think you said you're designing the presses that run these things.
That is
Oh yeah,
true.
you got your hands full.
Yes,
Trying
we
to make
do.
sure that you're cleaning the surface, right? Coming in, they got a vacuum cleaning all the debris that's on them
Yeah.
because it's, yeah.
Or
And so,
clean
it's
it
a
up after the
challenge.
jobs are done. It's really creating some real challenges from an engineering standpoint. So that was the question, like, is this trend going away? And I
It's all
think I
about
just
yield.
heard no.
It's not going away. It's all about yield. Yeah.
Crap. Thank you.
Awesome. Thanks, David. Do we have any other questions for Greg?
Awesome. Here, none. Turn it over to you, Kim.
All
Wrap it up.
right. Yeah, well, yeah, so I think we're all set here. Thank you everyone so much for your participation and for asking all of these great questions. We just thank you all so much for your time. We know you have a choice of where you spend it, and we appreciate you choosing to spend it with us. About a week after the presentation, we will send recordings and links, so be on the lookout for that. We wish you all a great rest of the week, and we hope you enjoy the weekend. Thank you all again.